Okay, well, welcome everybody. We're just waiting a few more seconds for people to join. So, and then we'll get started. I think we can go ahead and start. I would like to first welcome everybody and thank you very much for joining this exciting and very relevant webinar titled Water Management in a Post-COVID World. I'm David Molden. I'm an IWRA Executive Board member, and I will be your host today. This webinar is organized as part of the celebrations for the 50th anniversary of IWRA. As part of the celebrations, we've already had 2 high-level panels conducted, 4 interviews, and there's a lot more to come, including the IWRA Congress in Korea. And the November 29th, the first day of the Congress, will mark the 50th anniversary of IWRA. I would encourage welcome to this seminar to everybody. And if you're not members, please do join IWRA, try it out. It's a wonderful place to connect with a range of water professionals. I find it a great place to learn and to share views. So please do join IWRA. Before getting started, just a few ground rules. So the first is the event is being recorded, and we will have this event available so that others can join at a different time or a later date. And we'd like to keep this open for your questions and comments, and at the end have it more of a feedback and discussion style during the webinar. So please do use the chat box for this. And I notice people have already done this, and welcome to all from all over the world. So today we are fortunate, very fortunate, to have with us Professor Asit Biswas. For many of us, he needs absolutely no introduction, as he's truly one of the world's renowned experts on water. He's a scholar, prolific writer, thought leader. He's an advisor to prime ministers and presidents and ministers, and in fact, he's been a mentor to many of us in the water field. He is the co-founder of IWRA, and so I think this is a special year for you, Asit, 50 years, as well as co-founder of World Water Council, and numerous awards and recognitions he has received. By the way, what I appreciate this day about Professor Biswas is his turning to using op-eds or editorials or opinion pieces, right, to really get the messages off the ground. And these are often very thought-provoking or hard-hitting opinion pieces on a range of topics and picked up by the media. And we hope to hear some of the provocative thoughts today in this webinar. The topic of the webinar is water management in a post-COVID world. And after the shock of this pandemic, the world will surely be a different place. We're not going to wake up and find exactly the same thing. And I'm sure the questions for all of us is, what does it look like for us on the other side of this pandemic? You know, before the pandemic already, some trends in water management were quite dismal. We have many challenges about water security, about access to water, and then climate change for many people all over the world in every country and continent. And COVID certainly has brought on its challenges and laid bare stark inequalities amongst people around the world. So I think some of the big questions are, will we continue with these trends, or does this shock provide an opportunity to rise to the challenge and do something differently? Are there new and different ways of managing water and the Earth's resources that are both sustainable and more just? And for us, can the water community rise to the challenge to deliver the goods and to do this quickly? And to address some of those questions and more, I'm sure, let me turn to Professor Asit Biswas to look into the future and give us some clues about what we need to do. Asit, can I turn it over to you now?
Thank you, David, for that kind introduction. What I would like to do today is to give my thoughts on what is happening, what may likely happen. That will be the two parts I'll be able to cover in the half an hour we have today. And later on, perhaps I could write something on what I think needs to be done for the future. To start with, let me share with you my personal views. Water management right now, even before the COVID-19 hit us, was not the best, to put it politely, in much of the world. Even with the current knowledge, technology, available funds, and management expertise, the world should not have a water problem. I strongly believe that. But one of the biggest challenges we are facing now, we are stuck with some of our paradigms and thinkings, which perhaps would have been all right 30, 40, 50 years ago, but they are no longer valid, and certainly going ahead, they will become completely obsolete. And yet, anytime we start talking about changes, there's a large, very significant percentage of water professionals who double down and say the old way of doing things are okay. This poor management has meant that a large part of the world is facing water scarcity, which should not be the case, both in terms of quantity and quality. And COVID-19 has brought this out very forcefully. Let me just share you with a few facts. Because of COVID-19, one of the requirements is frequent hand washing with clean water and soap at frequent intervals, and good personal hygiene. Irrespective of all the rhetoric of the past, if you look at it now, what is the situation globally, it's a sad commentary that in 2021, at least 40% of the people of the world do not have access to clean water and soap to have the basic hand washing facility. This is, to me, should not be the case. We have SDG goals. If we look in the past, before COVID-19 hit us, and the SDG goals including the water and sanitations, before COVID-19, by say around 2019, the progress were not commensurate to reach them by 2030. After COVID-19, things have become worse. And one of the biggest problems, it's now looking like that overwhelming majority of the SDGs are unlikely to be realized by 2030. And another major issues I would like to share with you here. When the SDGs were approved, if we look at it carefully, that was for the entire world. It was not for developing countries. But the ensuing discussion and the countries themselves and the international organizations has implicitly assumed that SDGs are only for developing countries. That developed countries are already, the assumption is developed countries have already reached them. It's nothing farther from the truth. And this is one of the reasons, let me share with you some of the facts and figures. Even the world's most economically advanced country like the United States, the current statistics shows that at least 2 million people in the US do not have access to either piped water or basic sanitation. In indigenous communities in Australia to Canada to United States, their water supply is worse than what we can find in, say, Phnom Penh in Cambodia. So developed countries also have some serious catching up to do if they have to meet their SDGs. And yet there is no discussion in the international community that SDGs are for developed countries as well. And COVID-19 has hit this very much. For example, in UK now, UNICEF, for the first time in over 60 years of history, has started to provide food aid, food supply to the children in UK. So reducing hunger is going to be a big problem, not only in the developing country, but also the developed country. So let me share with you some of the things I've been finding out, I found out in recent time. In the developing world, clean water has been a luxury. In fact, one will be hard pressed to find a single city or an urban center anywhere in the developing world where the people trust that water they get from their water utility. No one I know in any developing country city drinks water from the tap. Unfortunately, this is becoming also a major problem for the developed country, not because the water is not clean, but because of the perception that the water may not be clean and people are not willing to take the risk. If we take a country like Japan, I don't know a single person who drinks water from the tap. They all either go buy bottled water or point of use treatment system before they dare to drink the water. And this is not because the water is not safe, but because the perception that water may not be safe. And this is going, and if you look in all the developed countries, things are going in the wrong direction. If you consider North America, Australia, Western Europe, Singapore, the percentage of people who have lost their faith in the water supply system from their utilities are increasing steadily. Singapore has a wonderful system. The water is safe to drink, but 80% of the households still boil water or use point of use treatment before drinking. The same goes for Hong Kong, where the percentage is even higher, 95%. And why has this happened? And this is because some of the problems we have seen happening in the Western world. It started in Milwaukee and then followed it in US, followed by Waikaton, Sydney, Flint. All these are well known. It has created a major problem with the lack of trust. And yet in the water profession, nobody talks about this loss of trust that people have now on the water utilities in the developed world. And this is not a problem for the engineers to solve. We need behavioral scientists, behavioral economists to find out how it can be solved. And if I look at what's happening in the world of water, I don't know a single water utility anywhere in the world that has a behavior economist or a behavior psychologist working for them. And they are not going to change by using people like us who are basically an engineering background and not know very much how people react in a certain way. And in my view, the next 15 to 20 years, much of the advances in water management, especially in terms of how people use water, how people use water, how much they use, when they use, will come not from the existing professionals, but bringing in behavioral economists and the behavioral psychologists in our fold. And yet, when you look into how many people one knows in the behavioral psychologists who are behavioral psychologists or a behavioral economist who are working in the water field and have been working for the last 10 or 15 years in the water area, I have to say that I can count them in the 10 fingers of my hand and still have a few left over. So the water profession, one of the first things we need to do is how to attract and keep the behavioral economists and behavioral psychologists so that they give us new insight as to how water can be used. The second problem I see is how we are framing the water issue. I would like to submit the framing of the water issue now is and has been for decades fundamentally wrong. When we talk about water, on the discussion of water, basically the discussions revolve around water use efficiency, water availability, all various technical issues. And as a result, most of the policymakers do not put water high up in the political agenda. Water becomes high up in the political agenda when there is a major flood or a major drought. The day the flood disappears or the day the rain starts falling after the drought years, water disappears completely from the political agenda. And let me share with you with an anecdote. In my early days, one of my mentors, she was a remarkable lady. She was Indira Gandhi, Prime Minister of India. And during one of my discussions with her, she told me, look, when I talk with you, you think the sun and the moon and the planets, all the planets revolve around water. And she said, I have to tell you, and I'm trying to quote as correctly as I can remember, she said, I have to tell you, as Prime Minister of India, I have absolutely no interest in water. And I was horrified. And I said, Indira ji, how is this possible? We human beings cannot live without water. No commercial, industrial, agricultural activity can happen water. How can you, as a prime minister, say that you have no interest in water? And I remember her answer to this day, and I learned from her. She said, look, as a prime minister, I'm not interested in means, but I'm interested in the ends. So I asked her, what do you mean by means and end? She explained to me that as a politician and as the head of the party and the head of the government, her main concern is how to reduce poverty. How do you ensure poverty alleviation? How do you increase the standard of living of the people, the quality of life of the people? And said, if you want to speak, those are my ends. If you can speak to me and talk to me that how water can act as an engine of economic development, as a catalyst to improve the income of the people, I'm very willing to listen to you. But please, if you want to discuss that standard water things you seem to want to discuss, I will put you in touch with my water minister and you can talk to your heart's content with the water minister. And I told her at that time that I have no interest in talking to the water minister. I would like to remain her advisor. And he said, fine, then let us in future discuss how water can act as a focus for development. So to her, issues like water and energy were means, and the end is the one that counts. And in the water profession, I would like to submit, we have miserably failed, as a result of which the politicians all over now have no interest in water, except during hydrological events. So one of the items I would like to leave with you is changing how we frame the water issues. Then few other issues, we have short time, few other issues, let me just go over it quickly. Some of the paradigms, some of the thinkings we're using are fundamentally wrong. We talk about water scarcity. If you look at the documents of the World Bank, UN, World Water Council, all the water professionals, everyone talks about how the water scarcity is affecting a lot of the people in the world. If you look at the thinking behind that, it is sad to see how all of us have been saying, many of us, or majority of us, have been saying that for a long time. Take the case of Singapore. Singapore has approximately 350 cubic meters of renewable water per head per person per year. So the UN, World Resources Institute, Asian Development Bank decided, and the World Resources Institute decided that Singapore is #1 in terms of water scarcity, facing the water scarcity, along with five or six other Gulf countries. When the Singapore government saw that, they basically asked the ADB and the UN and the World Bank the challenge. They said, we don't know why do you think Singapore is having a problem. Ask anyone in Singapore if they have a water problem, if they face water scarcity now or ever in recent years. The answer will be no. It all depends. And so they basically said to ADB and the World Resources Institute that either you take out that Singapore has a water scarcity, and Singapore said, we're not going to have a water scarcity even by 2050 or 2100, because Singapore has developed a closed loop. All the water that falls, much of it is collected. The whole city has become a water harvesting city. The water harvested is put to taken to the reservoir, treated, supplied to the water supply system. All the wastewater is collected, treated, and the quality of treatment is so good, the quality of wastewater is better than the water supply that people give. And by closing the loop, Singapore has ensured and is ensuring that it will not have a water problem. And as a result, if you look at the latest report of the World Resources Institute, they have taken out Singapore completely out of the top group of the water scarce situation. So that is one I want to share with you, that the world doesn't have a water problem. World doesn't have a water scarcity problem. Even for the most advanced, most dry cities of the world, if we do water management properly, then with the current technology, funds available, there should be no problem. And here, let me share with you some of the interesting things we can learn from places not well known in the world. I'll quickly share with you that a city like Phnom Penh, how is it possible a third world city like Phnom Penh, with very little expertise, very little funds available, now has water management performance indicators which are better than London, Los Angeles, or Paris. So it is not the lack of knowledge, it's not the lack of money, but how we manage the water. And for that, we need a good leadership. And that has been basically missing in the water professions. We are much happier talking about the problems, but we don't see the solutions when they are available. Now, quickly, let me share with you some of the paradigms which, in my view, have gone way past their sell-by date. And two paradigms I want to pick up very, very quickly with you. And that is, in the water field, we are enamored with integrated river basin management and integrated water resources management. Let me take IRBM, or the river basin management, first. If anyone does some serious studies, you'll find out the river basin development concept was not put forward by engineers like us. It was put forward by a remarkable American president who wanted to use river basin development to get over the Great Depression. So Franklin Roosevelt started this program of the 1930s and the 1940s, where he used river basin development as a catalyst to reduce employment, to reduce to improve the quality of life of the people. And when he started, and he was the one who started the river basin development. And if you look at the 1930s and 1940s in the US, it's a remarkable example how water has worked as a catalyst for regional development and economic development. So 1930s and 1940s were the golden days of dam building in the United States, which created and water infrastructure, which created employment and which gave people the wherewithal income so that they could have a good style of living. We have forgotten that. Now what we are doing is we are proposing integrated river basin management, integrated water resources management. And I'd like to submit to you that river basin management, integrated river basin management, has never worked anywhere in the world, except perhaps in a small river like Seine Normandy in France, where it has worked. And it has worked only because, by a miracle, the French Parliament gave Seine Normandy authority the taxation power, as a result of which they have the money to do some remarkable things. So Seine Normandy became a successful case study where the river basin could be managed. And what the water profession did is to extend it by saying IRBM, that everywhere we need to have integrated river basin development. I like to submit to you that except for Seine Normandy, no medium to large size basin can ever be managed properly. Take the one case of Ganges. Ganges in India, the government of India 30 or 40 years ago decided to look at Ganges as a whole river. Ganges, the Indian part of the Ganga, as they'll manage on a coordinated, integrated basis. Then they found out that if you look at the Ganga and Brahmaputra, they're connected, so they have to be separated. So they separated Ganga with Brahmaputra. They said, okay, we'll plan for Ganga. Then they found out it was too complex, too difficult, and impossible to do. Then they decided perhaps we could go to one of the major tributaries. Instead of taking Ganga as a whole, take one of the major tributaries of Ganga to do the planning. And so they picked up Jamuna as a possibility of doing river basin management for the Jamuna as a whole. Then they found out Jamuna was too big to handle, too many problems, too many issues. It couldn't be handled as a whole. Then they decided to divide Jamuna into Upper Jamuna and Lower Jamuna. It didn't work. So last 30 years, nothing has happened. And yet, if you look at Indian National Water Plan, last 30 years, right, they have now 3 national water plans which have more improved over a period of time. Each one talks about there should be river basin management on a management plan should be on a river basin basis. Now, ask yourself, in 30 years, how many river basin management plan India has developed? Answer is 0. How many river basin management plan India is even considering? Answer is 0. Not even a single one is happening. And so for Indian case, of course, there's a lot of difficulty, but we have to start thinking about, are some of the paradigms were widely popular in our profession, do they have any validity? And what happens is, once you say that what I'm saying, that IRBM does not work, will not work except for some small rivers, or at most medium-sized rivers, the first reaction is the IRBM professionals to attack you in all ways possible. It's because they see their interests are being are being somehow hampered. Same goes with the IWRM. There's a world lobby now, integrated water resources management. And if we look at what is happening in recent years, nothing is further from the truth. South Africa first decided that they will can IWRM long time ago. I was the minister of Lindy Hendricks, a remarkable lady, advisor to her. And she basically said, we drop IWRM in South Africa and use rather water as a catalyst for economic development. Since then, things have moved, and South Africa has basically ignored IWRM and looking for how water can be used for economic development. Same goes for other parts of the world. In India, the government in the last 3 national water plans proposes that there should be IWRM. Nothing has happened, nothing will happen, but there is a big lobby now, I'm afraid, which are proposing IWRM. I'm willing to, once you start challenging them, they start making personal attack. I'm willing to debate anybody, anywhere, at any time, that why IWRM, IRBM has not worked, will not work in the coming years. We have to start thinking of a new paradigms for that. But that creates, instead of a discussion, what we run into is a lot of problems people are not willing to discuss as some of the problems we are facing. So these are some of the things we need to start thinking about as to where water management in the future has to go. And we are seeing a lot of changes, a lot of different things. If we look at China now, they have developed significant improvement in the water management issues. China's agricultural water requirements has been reduced very significantly by new methods, new paradigms, a new way of doing things. And that has not only decreased the water requirements. If we look at China between 2010 and now, China has reduced its agricultural requirements, water requirements very, very significantly, at least by 10 to 15%. And by 2030, they plan to reduce it by 30% without sacrificing yield. So we have to start thinking about these paradigms that more water means more food. Those days are long over. So we need to think about how, with our limited water resources, can we provide the future. And the last item I would like to share with you is my strong belief: water problems of the world are solvable. Are solvable not only in the future, when we will have, by 2100, we'll have 10 million people in the world. That is the current forecast. It's not only now, but by 2050 or 2100, when the demand for water, unless we change our way of thinking, will be even higher for agricultural production, industrial requirement. And we have to start thinking about how do we close the loop, as Singapore has successfully done. We have to think about how a country like India can reduce its water requirement, as China has done and will do in the coming years. So instead of getting hung up on some of the paradigms, old paradigms which do not work, we need to start thinking about what works and what we'll do. And my personal view is the world has enough water, not only now, but also by 2050 or 2100, not for clean drinking water and providing clean drinking water and for all industrial other activities. And let me just end with a short anecdote. And that is how much water a good human being, a human being needs to have a good standard of life. We are finding out now that in many parts of Europe, that 70 to 80 liters per capita per day is enough to have a good quality of life, good health, and everything available. And if we look at what is happening in the rest of the world, per capita water consumption is significantly higher than that. Singapore did a study in the 1960s to 70s where they came to the conclusion that 70 liters per capita per day, a person could have a good way of life. More than that is aesthetic, it's not a necessity. And that many European cities are now coming to that level. And UK, last year's the Ofwat, they suggested that by 2050, they have to reduce all the water authorities have to reduce the per capita consumption to half, which will bring it down to 70. And if you do that, then the question comes, why is it other parts of the world need so much water? Even countries like India, big cities, they're talking about 130 to 140 liters per capita per day, which they can't provide. So we have to start thinking about what are the paradigms, what are old paradigms, are they valid anymore? I think time has come for us to take a new way of looking at water. And I'll conclude with my firm statement, as I said before, that world has enough water, not only for now, but for 2100. But what world doesn't have is a good management practices and good administrative practices which make that possible. And saying that world is going to face a water crisis, the much of the world, if you look at the current maps of the much of the world now, half of the world is now considered to be in a serious water problem. And that does not have to be so. You take the case of Singapore, take the case of few other, and the case of China, many things are happening which people are not aware of. So the question comes, how do we move from our current thinking to a new way of thinking, which is, in my view, essential if we have to solve the world's water problem. It cannot be solved by the present paradigms and the present ideas, and we'll start continuing saying the world is having a water problem when that is not the case. Thank you, David, and then I'll be happy to answer any question, comments on this so far.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, excuse me, Asit, for a wonderful presentation. Many ideas in there. The first is it needs more than engineers to solve this. We need more people with behavioral psychology or economists. I was just wondering in the audience, are there people with that background? And if so, you can just put in the chat box, yes, I have that kind of background, just to canvas where we're at in the seminar. But then you were calling for a reframing of the water issues, right? And actually you might say a few more words. How should that look like around the reframing? And I think we had a question from Professor Shaw, and nice to see you from Karakoram International University, that are saying that these are more institutional and policy issues, and how can we improve that policy framework? And I think that's getting to your issue about just how we frame the water question. Can you say some more words about that? How should we be putting that, the water question, forward?
If you want, my views is very simple. After my encounter with Mrs. Gandhi, and she was a remarkable lady, the reason people, the politicians, now I'm advising about 21 governments at the minister or the prime minister level, and several CEOs of major and multinational corporations, which are in the Fortune 500 list. We have to talk their language. And that is the main thing. If you want the prime minister to be a prime minister of a country to be interested in water, then we have to show them that what can be done and how it will benefit their own election, how it will improve their all the. If you look, all the party leaders, one is to continue their reign. The party wants to remain in power. The prime minister wants to remain in power. The minister wants to remain in power. In order to do that, they have to show they're doing something. So if we can show to the prime minister, and that is important, the prime ministers first, that good water management will improve their standard of living, their economic wealth of living, improve agricultural development, industrial development, environment, you'll get an audience to see. If you just say that we are having a water crisis, it will come to the one year, go to the other year. Same goes with the corporate heads I've been advising in recent years. If you go to the CEOs and say that water is important, that doesn't make very much. But if you go to the CEOs and say that water, energy are your essential inputs, we have to manage in a different way so that not only your reputation becomes bigger, higher in the world in these days of environment, social, and governance requirements, but also your bottom line will also become better. And if you frame the water issues in this overall way, you get a hearing from the chairman of the board or the CEOs of major multinational corporations. But if you just go and tell them you should manage water better, we don't get anywhere. Yeah. Same goes with the prime ministers and the ministers. If you say that doesn't go better, you have to show it is in their own self-interest to do things better, and it can be done better.
Right, right. So I'm just thinking, what does that mean for us as water professionals? Do we need to retrain ourselves? And by the way, Asit, there was a question related to that, which was from Mexico, from America Lutzle, and asking what, politicians, as I read the question, seems to have bought in to a privatization as a policy strategy, as a good and efficient solution. What's your reflection on that? What is your opinion about that?
The main problem with the privatization, it has become a lightning rod to two groups of people who are for it or against it. My thesis is very simple, David. My thesis is very simple. If the public sector can do it, good luck to it. In fact, if you look at the public sector performance, the world's two most efficient utility are in the public sector. Number one, Tokyo. Number two, Singapore. They are in the public sector. But the public sector uses private sector extensively as a subcontractor to where they can't do things better. At the same time, I can give you examples where the world's worst utilities are in the public sector. Same goes with the private sector. In many places, the private sector has gone and improved very, very significantly. I can give examples also from many cases where the private sector has gone and make things worse than it was before. So it's the ideological discussions. Personally, I'm not an ideological person. If public sector can do it, good luck to public sector. If private sector can do it, good luck to the private sector. But it should what we should ensure that people have access to clean water at an affordable price, and make sure the future investment capitals are available to the utility so that requirements are the water quality and the quantity requirements are increased. One of the things most people don't realize, if you take a city like Singapore, right now we are monitoring 351 water quality parameters every day in order to make sure that Singapore's water supply is safe. There is no private sector utility I know anywhere in the world has even half of its monitoring regularly. And Singapore is a city where people pay for water. If if people cannot pay for water, then the Social Security Department gives you a special voucher which you can use towards either your water bill or your energy bill. So you get a voucher if you are poor. If you have a large family, you can't afford it, you get a voucher for electricity and energy. But the utility gets full money of the voucher from the Social Security Department. So utility doesn't pay. It's a job of utility is to run a utility efficiently for all and make sure investments are available in the future. It's the job of the Social Security Ministry to make sure the people who are not so fortunate, their water and wastewater requirements are met. So if you can do that, I have no problem whether it is run by a public sector, private sector, or as in most cases, a mixture of both in one form or another.
Okay, so it sounds like take a pragmatic approach, get the job done, probably by a mixture of approaches.
And solve the people's problem rather than take an ideological approach, one is good or better. I can, as I said, I can name you both sectors, bad ones and the good ones.
Yeah, so then we have to get that, we need that discussion with politicians too.
Yes.
There was a question also about, you know, and those were good examples, but how do you use water as a catalyst for economic growth? Because that's what you're arguing. That's the argument for politicians. So do you have some good examples of that? You know, how do you use it to catalyze economic growth, water?
Well, I'll give you the example we did for Mrs. Gandhi, because she was my mentor and I got interested in her. The use is water. How do we increase water to improve the agricultural production of the farmers, and that way improve their standard of living and income? So develop first to convince the politicians that it is worth doing, that not only water, but the other inputs are necessary to improve the farmer's lifestyle. And many of the things, one of the things I find now that is happening, especially in China, most people don't know about it. The things have changed remarkably in China, how they have improved not only the water management, but the farmer's lifestyle that way. China now has very large assemblage of areas which are run as a cooperative. If you're a farmer, you have a small half a hectare of land plot, you join a cooperative. In some areas it's happening, and the cooperatives are large, and the cooperatives then bring in professional management, buying power, marketing, so that, and they decide which crop will bring the maximum money. So what they're doing in China in some of these large cooperatives is completely professional managed, but depending on your share of the land the cooperatives has, you get that share of the profit from the land. And initially, quite a few farmers did not join it because they thought they could do better, until they saw their neighbors doing exceedingly well. And these cooperatives are becoming bigger and bigger. And they are now looking to the market, looking to the management, looking what types of crops to grow and improve the farmer's income. So these are some of the things we have to think of. If you look water, it becomes a zero-sum game. We need to look at water and the other agricultural inputs so that we increase the farmer's income. And if you look at it that way, there are a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, good. And by the way, to the audience, please do continue. There's some wonderful chats going on the side as well around these issues. So please do keep that up. There were a few questions that were, we've been focusing on the behavioral and the political side, but there are a few comments, questions say, well, what we need is better hydrogeology and ways of conserving water, as well as what are nature-based solutions for smallholder farmers in Nigeria. So it does seem there is a role for, we shouldn't discount the role of our technical people, but what can we do to get the different technologies involved to solve some of these water problems?
I don't want to downplay the need of technology, but we have to change our mindset. That's what I'm trying to say. That our task is to first to provide people with adequate quality of water and quantity of water. And that is one question we have to meet. Second, people who use water for their livelihood, like the farmers, especially in the developing world, how can their income be increased? How can their lifestyle be increased? And that can be done not by looking at only small farmer, but looking at the other ways like the Chinese are doing. The farmers are joining. Initially, most farmers were reluctant to join these so-called cooperatives until they saw how much benefit and economic development funds their neighbors were making from joining large cooperative. So for the small farmers of Nigeria or anywhere, my thesis is we need to start thinking about new way so that their lifestyle is improved, their food security is maintained, and this cannot be done by maintaining the small farmers the way we have been doing and saying they need to be helped. The world does not have enough money, so we have to look at, without any dogma or anything, look at the Chinese way of doing things, and if you can modify it, apply it to Nigeria, I will say, please go ahead and take a look at it. Don't just get rid of the China just because it is coming from China. There are many good things that we need to learn from China, and so perhaps Nigerian groups can go and see how China is doing and improving the lifestyle of their farmers, and then see to what extent the Chinese methods can be modified to feed the Nigerian lifestyle, Nigerian way of living. So that is my view.
Yeah, so certainly in China, the question was also about nature-based solutions for adaptation. I know China has taken a stance on that as well, to be more ecologically minded in that. But I do think it's beyond, look outside the water and agriculture field to see what other solutions are there. Asit, I want to continue a little bit because there was a few questions challenging a little bit from Claudia Ringler, who is asking, Singapore was able to achieve water self-sufficiency because it had the financial means to do so. So surely seeing the metric, right?
I would completely disagree with Claudia, a good friend of mine, Claudia. I'm sorry I have to disagree with you. The reason Singapore became what it is one reason, and one reason, not only in the water area. That is because of Lee Kuan Yew. I have a long discussion with Lee Kuan Yew, and Lee Kuan Yew made sure that water is at the center of, because of the shortage of water, that water is at the center of that. He had in his office 3 people, and Cecilia and I had long discussions with him, 3 people looking into how all the industrial decisions, everything else revolved around water, because at that time when it started off, about 20% of water was available from Singapore, rest were coming from there. So it is not in Singapore developed because it ensured its water security along with other security as well.
Now the next question though is also crucial in this. Perhaps Singapore saw some numbers that said, hey, we've got a lot of people and not that much water available. Don't you think those metrics helped in that decision to highlight that water was an issue?
The only reason, in my view, where Singapore succeeded not only in the area of water, but in other fields, was because of leadership. And I think this is the main problem. The world does not have a leader of Lee Kuan Yew's style, and he was the man of his age. What he did to Singapore is incredibly took Singapore from a third world city to be one of the highest income countries in the world. And he did that first by ensuring that people have enough water, and then making some very hard decisions. He decided that if food self-sufficiency is an issue, so basically Lee Kuan Yew set up a system by which the food could be imported from all over the world, but Singapore does not have the water to grow it. So the food self-sufficiency is good. And if you look at now FAO's index of food security, Singapore is #1 in the world, and it has virtually no agricultural production.
Yeah, thanks. And I'll let you and Claudia discuss more on that topic, but I hope I represented that well. Let me go on to a different kind of question. We have several. And one was, yes, you say the quantity of water is sufficient and what we need is better management, but are you concerned about adequate quantity of good quality water? And this is from Renee Martin Nagel.
Absolutely correct. One of the, I would say the following. From my analysis, the next serious problem some of the major developing countries will face within the next, I would say within the next 10 decades, is not because of lack of quantity of water, but because of poor quality of water. I can forecast with a reasonable degree of certainty that within the next 10 years, a country like India will face a major problem in terms of health because of poor quality of water, and that is my concern. So the answer to the question is quality of water is as important as quantity of water, but unfortunately in the developing world we have not given enough attention to quality, and even now the quality gets a lip service from the international community. We all talk about quantity, but not enough about quality. So I expect a major catastrophe in India within the next 10 years because of because of poor quality of water, not because of shortage of water.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's a lot more talk about quantity as opposed to quality. There was a related question from David Hill is, how do we advance the role of environmental health as a key market or management practice to support ongoing water development? So what, thinking about environmental health, right? Which is also an issue related to quality.
My major concern right now in the developing world is really not the quantity of water, because we can handle that, but quality of water, which virtually all developing world now is in a mess. So yes, that is, to me, is the major problem. And unfortunately, we don't see enough attention, virtually even moderate attention on quality by the governments of the developing countries to quality, except lip service, and also the international organizations. They all talk about the quantity, but very little quality and how the quality of water needs to improve, and especially in the urban areas where all the quality now, all the water around near or around urban area are heavily contaminated. How do you handle them in the future? How do you make sure people have enough safe water to drink? That's going to be a major problem coming to the world, developing world within the next decade for sure.
Okay, I think we have to start kind of winding down. There are still several questions, but there was one kind of related to this about, we're looking at new paradigms of water. We've been talking about that, but what are legal systems that are able to support this, right? How do we need to turn to the legal systems to do this? Do we need more legal systems in our profession?
The biggest problem I find is not the lack of laws, but enforcement of the existing laws. I'm now doing a major 20-year exercise for the Middle East countries. If you look at the laws, they're as good as any in the Western world. But the sad problem is none of them are enforced. And I give you an example. I've been advising the ministers of Egypt for about 30 years, all the minister of Egypt from 1974 until Dr. Abu Zaid. And the focus has been, I forgot what I was going to talk about.
About enforcement of laws
Enforcement,
that we were
yes.
on.
The anecdote I was going to say is when Anwar Sadat was the president, he asked his people to develop the stringent water quality laws in Egypt, and his people did it, and the law was passed, which said that anyone who pollutes, any industry which pollutes the water, will be, the head of that industry would be put in jail for a minimum of 5 years. The day that law was passed, and I was in Cairo at that time, heads of all the private sector industries came to see Sadat to offer the resignation, because they said they cannot do this and they don't want to go to jail. And so I can tell you this for a fact, Sadat told them that law will not be implemented. So you can do whatever you're continuing, you won't go to jail. I can assure you there will be no problem. So this is the problem. Lack of law is not an issue in most parts of the world, virtually all over the world. The main problem is implementation, and that is missing. Yeah. And the Gulf country I'm now working on, they have the laws better than the US in terms of water quality, but none of it is implemented. So what is the reason for having laws? So we need to think about developing implementable laws which society will accept. Economically it is possible, and that is the main thing in my view. Implementation of laws rather than having fancy laws which nobody gives a damn about.
Yeah, and thanks, Asit. And I think that's also true about policies. I've seen so many wonderful policies, but just their implementation is lacking in so many different places. I think, Ignacio, I think we have to wind down now. We've come up to time, is that right? And if so, Asit, can you we covered a range of issues. Maybe if you could have a few minutes to kind of wrap up your thinking on these questions. Yeah.
Basically, my personal view is the water profession has been in a bandwagon saying the world is running out of water. My thesis is completely different. The world is not short of water, but what it needs is management of water properly. And that needs a new way of looking at water management, which I don't see happening in many places. If we continue as we are going now, I think I can safely forecast within the next 10 years, we are going to see major catastrophe, primarily because of problems with water quality, major catastrophes in different parts of the world because of water quality problems. And that is my view, is one of the important things. It's not the shortage of water that is an issue. It's the management of water, to me, that has been missing.
Just one last question then. What do we have to do now? One or two things at water professionals just to change that, to get off that curve, to avoid the catastrophe and move to a better place? Is there something using the pandemic, for example?
Basically, look, why is it after spending hundreds of millions of dollars, we have not managed to solve the water problem? How are we doing that? Can we do it better? And the answer virtually in every case is we can do it significantly better and more efficiently. Look at the administrative side, legal side, management side. It's not the lack of expertise. If you look at the expertise available in many countries, if you look at Phnom Penh, it has very little technical and administrative expertise. And yet Phnom Penh's water performance is better than most cities of the developed world. So it is not the lack of money, lack of knowledge, it's basically will and the leadership. And that unfortunately is missing.
Okay, good. So I think we need to wrap up. Just a few words from my side. And first, thanks, Asit, very much. And I think we can give you a round of applause for a wonderful presentation and fielding so many questions. I think that was a fantastic event in a short period of time. just a few takeaways from my side is just what you were saying at the end. It's not lack of water. It is just the way it is the management of water. And what I was gathering from the presentation is that we need new and different ways of looking at water, right? We need, for example, more people with a behavioral or social science background getting involved. It's not strictly an engineering problem, but importantly, it's how we frame the water issues and how we discuss with policymakers and politicians to reframe water issues in their language that will help them solve their problems, say, as far as stimulating economic development or getting out of poverty. And to do that, we have to look beyond the paradigms that we are using and look at new and different paradigms, but keeping in mind that all the problems are solvable. I mean, getting our minds together, we can solve it. We do have good examples from around the world. It's just a matter of us getting our minds together. And I would urge all of us, right, to get active as we're emerging from this pandemic. I think it is a great opportunity. It's a time for change. I think people will be listening to the solutions we give. So let's all get out there and be active. Once again, thank you, panelists. Thank you, Professor Asit Biswas, so much. Thank you, by the way, Ignacio de Regibus, for putting this together for us as well. Let's give a round of applause and appreciate the event that we had today. Thank you.
And thank you, David, for moderating it so well.
Okay, good. Thank you, Asit.